Thank you all. Delighted to be here. As I tell my history students, I teach at the City University of New York in the PhD program. Thank you. As I tell my history students until they want to choke me, the past is a foreign country. We can visit there, try to learn the customs, translate the language, feel the air and the light, sniff the fragrances, recoil at the foul odors. But we are foreigners in a strange land. This is true as much of the recent past as it is of colonial America or 12th century Venice. Writing about the recent past is not easy, as I learned this time around. First, there are people you have to talk to. And while I was blessed from beginning to end by having some fascinating people to talk to about Joe Kennedy, including large numbers of Kennedys, I much prefer working from written documents to listening to people talk and trying to figure out what's real, what's imagined, what they know, what they think they know because someone told them, what they think they know but they don't know at all. The other difficulty about writing about our recent past is that it's not always easy to establish one's distance from it, to construct the pastness of the past that is so close to us. And yet, this is what historians have to do. Our job is to complicate, to take apart our common sense view of the recent past, to interrogate what we think we know, to demystify, demythologize, to move beyond the cliches about winners and losers, saints and sinners, about the wisdom and courage of our forefathers, especially those of the greatest generation. Our job as historians is to tell a different story, one grounded in evidence. The life of Joseph P. Kennedy was, for me, a sort of antique funhouse mirror, which, if I looked at it long enough, would reflect back to me, often in hazy, indistinct, distorted form, images of events, people, places, which, organized and arranged, told the story of 20th century America. As a historian, I'm interested in origin, so I will tell you about the origin of this book. I was a colleague of Arthur Schlesinger at the City University of New York. He introduced me to the Kennedy family at some event, I don't know what it was, a reception, a dinner. I met with Gene Kennedy Smith, Ambassador Smith, for the first time. And I was finishing up my Hearst book, and in my Hearst biography, I had used a treasure trove of materials that Gene Kennedy Smith's daughter, who was writing a collection, who was compiling letters from her father to her aunts and uncles, had put me onto. And in that treasure trove of material, letters from William Randolph Hearst to Joseph Kennedy and back and forth, I glimpsed a man who was different from everything I had heard about him. So I told Gene Kennedy Smith at some point that her daughter should write a biography of her grandfather, and that the man was absolutely fascinating. It's a good word to use when you don't know if you're going to be writing about a villain or a hero. It was fascinating, I said, and somebody should do a biography. About a year later, I saw Gene Kennedy Smith again, and she approached me and she said the family wanted me to do it, to write that biography, that they recognized that there was need for such a biography. And I said, well, I'm in the midst of writing another book. I'm writing a book about Andrew Carnegie. And she said, well, when are you going to be finished? You can't say no to a Kennedy. I said, I don't know, 6 months maybe. 6 months to the day, we got a call at home from someone I was convinced was a Ted Kennedy impersonator. I don't know if any of you grew up in New York or listened to Don Imus in the Morning. He had a Ted Kennedy impersonator, and it sounded just like this. So I listened to the message, and after listening to it the second or third time, I realized it was not an impersonator. It was the senator asking me to come to Washington to talk to him about doing a biography of his father. I went to Washington, and the senator and I and his two dogs had lunch together. On Mondays, his dogs came to the Senate with him because the Senate wasn't in session and they could roam, play in the Senate. It was a weird sight, believe me. We were brought into a tiny little conference room, the two dogs, the senator and me, with a card table in the middle. And the senator, who was always on a diet, they believed that his back, he would feel better the thinner he was, had the most bedraggled sandwich I've ever seen, like a sliver of tuna fish that looked as old as he was, and on a piece of bread. I had 2 pieces of bread and potato chips. And we talked for 3-4 hours. And what I remember saying over and over and over again is, you don't want me to write this book because I'm a historian and I'm going to find stuff. And whatever I find, I'm going to put in the book. And who knows, but by the time this book comes out, there might be a Kennedy running for office. Little did I know that Kennedy's name would be Joseph P. Kennedy III, who ran for and was elected to the Congress. Well, the election came before my book came out. But I was worried, and I thought it was a legitimate concern, and the senator should know about it. He said, don't worry. He said, what are you going to find? He said, everybody knows that my father had an affair with Gloria Swanson. And he said, and I know my father wasn't an anti-Semite. And whatever you find and whatever you write is going to be truer to the man I knew and loved than what's out there. So I said, okay, I want full access to everything. I want full access to the family, to all the documents, to everything that's stored at the Kennedy Library in Boston, but has been closed to researchers. And you will see the book, you and the family and your lawyers and representatives will see the book when it's between hard covers, not before. And I won't be coming back to you for permission to cite anything. Whatever I find, I'm going to use in the book. He said, okay. Then it took 18 months to get this all in writing. And I was off. I was off and running. And I found a more remarkable story than I had even imagined I was going to find. I found the story of a man who spent his life moving back and forth from being an outsider to an insider, to an outsider to an insider. I found the story of an Irish Catholic who was not ashamed of his heritage, but didn't want to be defined by it. Of a third-generation immigrant who cared little about the country his grandparents had been born in, who had no desire to visit Ireland or to read about it, who considered himself 100% American and couldn't understand why anyone would think of him as less than that, who was a Catholic, who went to Mass every Sunday and went to confession. And the Catholic Church in Boston was the anchor of his existence. And everywhere he went, he would find out where the church was. When he went on vacation in New Hampshire, he sent a note to the innkeeper, who was a friend of his, and said, find out when they do confession on Friday. And also find out if Toodles and Millie are going to, he was married at the time, if Toodles and Millie are going to be around. I mean, this, in one sentence,